Ariel Brunner, Head of EU Policy, BirdLife International. Do you feel that the current discussions about the future of the Common Agricultural Policy and the direction of agriculture in Europe are going in the right direction?
Well, I think the discussion is evolving in very interesting directions. The real question is, will our politicians have the courage to take the right decisions and make the changes that we actually need?
What changes do we actually need?
Well, essentially what we need is to move from the current policy that is mainly about subsidies, entitlements, that most of them are decided on the basis of all sorts of historical accidents and don't really correspond to what people do on the ground, move toward a policy that is based on clear contracts between farmers and society, where farmers are rewarded for the delivery of what we call public goods, of especially the environmental public goods that society needs from the farming community.
We did see a switch to single farm payments, decoupling from production. I mean, that presumably is a step in the right direction, because some of the money now, also through modulation, is going into rural development and protecting the environment.
Yeah, indeed. Decoupling has been a key step, but now we need really to move on. Decoupling has been very important in breaking the perverse link between production and subsidies, where people were pushed to produce at the expense of the environment, regardless of what the market was demanding. The question now is to move to paying people for actually doing what society wants, not just paying people regardless of and then maybe attaching some rules to it, but having a very clear link between what citizens pay for and what citizens get back for.
What has been the cost of intensive agriculture, which we've seen? I mean, we know it's degraded the soil in many places. What has been the cost in terms of wildlife generally, and perhaps especially bird life?
Well, we know that we've lost about 50% of the populations of farmland birds over the recent decades. We also know that agriculture-related habitats are the most threatened habitats or among the most threatened habitats in Europe, including within the Natura 2000 network of protected sites. So biodiversity has been really hard hit by modern agriculture. We now know much more about how to do things differently. We have 20 years of experience with agri-environment that has shown in some cases how things can be reversed and how in some cases even modern, highly productive agriculture can be combined with biodiversity conservation, or how some of the extensive traditional farming systems can be very good for biodiversity and for the production of quality and specialty foods, and can be combined with rural development, tourism, and so on. So we actually know in many cases what should be done. The question is now having the right policy that sends farmers the right messages so that those good experiences can be scaled up and actually make a difference on the scale that we need.
There is talk, of course, of trying to protect the environment with the reforms of the Common Agricultural Policy, creating areas of wildlife around fields, which is obviously good for the farmers too, because it means that the pollinators are still there. Does that go far enough, though? Because there's also a lot of talk about the need to feed 9 to 10 billion people, which may require the use of biotechnology.
Well, we think that ultimately the two agendas are really the same, because today we could feed everybody that is around this planet in a decent way. We have huge issues with poverty, with access to food, with distribution, with income disparities, but we don't have an overall question of producing enough food. Now, with the increases in world population, and especially with the pressures coming from the collapse of water resources, the pressures on ecosystems and climate change, we will have at a certain point a big question mark about our capacity to produce food. But this is really about managing our natural resources in a wiser way. So fixing our ecosystems and using our natural resources in a better way is the key to our long-term food security. It's not an either-or, it is the issue we are talking about.
Does biotechnology have a part to play in this, or do you have your doubts about that?
Well, personally, I have my doubts on quite a few of the biotechnology streams, but I think what is very clear is that the farming of the future will have to be much more knowledge intensive. And I think we need to keep in mind that knowledge is not just technology, and certainly not just biotechnology. And your allusion clearly is to GMOs. GMOs are a rather, in a sense, marginal part of the picture. We need to have much more agronomy brought back to the fields, much more ecology brought back to the field. What we've been doing in recent decades have been specializing on one crop, one strain of one crop, big monoculture, simplifying the agroecosystem into one production system producing one thing. We need to go back to systems that produce multiple crops in rotation, to landscapes that produce crops and wildlife and clean water and so on. We need to combine food production with material production, or even with energy production up to a point. We need much more complex systems. Those complex systems need more knowledge, and more knowledge means more agronomy, more ecology, and yes, also more technology, and part of it is also more biotechnology. Then you can have a big debate about, certainly if you look at most of the GM technology that is being deployed today is taking us in the wrong direction rather than in the right direction. It's, I mean, if you look at the big, huge expansions of Roundup Ready soy that is blanketing South America, that's not the kind of agriculture we need in this century.
What would you like to see the politicians doing about the CAP? What should the next reform contain?
Well, we want politicians to have the courage to finally really reform this policy on the basis of the idea of public money for public goods. We want to move away from entitlements to contracts, stable, clear, transparent contracts where farmers can rely on them and farmers can know what they are expected to do and what they are being paid for. We want those contracts to help farmers by stabilizing their incomes, but attached to clear commitments, clear environmental commitments, move to that direction that everybody here seems to agree on. More crop rotation, more landscape element, avoiding the collapse of high natural value farming system, of marginal farming systems, better care for the soil, better care for the water, that sort of things.